All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Katy Gostaspi, and this is a new podcast series under my main podcast that I just started. It is the What and Who is a Healer podcast, I like to call it. And I really started this podcast because as a healer, I was curious at how the world defines healing and healers. I figured if I was curious, likely others were curious. So I thought I would start asking and learning and sharing others' wisdom and intellect with you. So I've spent my entire life, first as a securities lawyer, and now as an expert and a consultant supporting others. It took me years to find my real purpose. I'm not about empowering my clients, but about opening up a portal for clients to look at the core of who they are in a relaxed, fun way where they feel taken care of. So this allows clients to align with their zone of genius by really connecting them to their heart, spirit, and power. And then my clients can move forward with their intentions. Intentional branding plan is what I call it. And clients then don't need empowerment because they can tap into their own power at this point. And the results they get are fantastic. So my clients often see themselves for who they are, and then their clients see them for who they are. And that's an easy way to get more clients, grow their fan base, get attention, get noticed. So that's how I serve as a leader and as a healer. So healers and healing comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes and professions. So let's talk with my first guest and learn. So Cassandra and I were introduced because I asked my online community, I said, hey, how do you guys define healing and healers? Starting a new podcast. And I love working with artists. And so Cassandra is a fantastic artist. You should check her out at Cassandra Kubinski. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, .com. Her bio is remarkable. I just had such fun on her website. So welcome, Cassandra.
Hi, Katy. Hello. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Thanks for being here. You've got such a fantastic voice, obviously, because you're an artist and a singer and you do voiceovers. So it's so cool having you on the podcast because you sound amazing.
Well, thank you. It's interesting. I never really thought of myself as, I use my voice for everything, and I have in my profession since I was really young, but I haven't really pinpointed that. But you're right. There's such power in just a voice, both literal and figurative. So I'm glad that mine comes across.
Absolutely. There's power in our being and our natural gifts and strengths. And yours happens to be your voice. Although having had a couple of conversations with you now, I have a feeling you just kind of exude that as a person. So tell us, in part one, I want to get to know you and have a conversation with you about your healing, how you define healing. And then in part two, we'll get down to providing some hands-on tools for our listeners and for you. So tell us whatever you want us to know about yourself, and how are you all doing with the pandemic and everyone feeling good, and whatever tips you want us to know about how you've weathered it professionally and personally.
Sure. So I am a singer and a songwriter, and sometimes I do both of those things at one time. And and so that's really what I've focused on in my career for the past 15 years or so. As an entertainer, I did start when I was pretty young. I was doing professional musical theater by the time I was 12 and dabbled in some film and TV work, went to Florida State University to study theater, and then landed in New York City. And I was very convinced that all I wanted to do was be a singer-songwriter. At the time, John Mayer and Nora Jones and Vanessa Carlton, artists like that, were really breaking out. And I felt like that was my tribe. I just really felt like, okay, these are the people who they have this inner vulnerability and this inner voice and this inner vision, and they put that forth as themselves in their music. And that really called to me. So that's what I've built over the last 15 years. And I now perform and sing and write songs and also do voiceover work, as you mentioned. So I've been really lucky to develop my career, in the zone of where I wanted it to go.
That's beautiful, the way you put the words to what they do and why they do it. It truly is amazing. We call people artists, and I think that the word in everyday vernacular has shifted to where the perception of what's an artist is really, I hope this podcast helps people really understand, it's so much more than just painting or singing. It's really the capacity to self-express at a level, and to beyond that know yourself first to be able to self-express, that really, I think, moves people. So the words you used were beautiful. How are
Thank
your
you.
family and you doing with the pandemic?
We're all well. Thank you for asking. Fortunately, everybody has stayed safe and healthy through this whole 4 months. And all of my closest family are very spread out throughout the Northeast. So everybody's been healthy and safe, and we've seen each other a few times and had some social distancing opportunities to get together. So yeah, it's really not been, while most certainly there's been a huge impact on my life and my work. I would say that overall, I've looked at it from the beginning as an opportunity, and as something that was probably really good if I would let it be really good.
Well said. If you would let it, if we would all let it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just put out my e-newsletter for July, and one of my core values is freedom. So I asked the question, who are you to be free, and how can we let ourselves be free? And if we let ourselves, right? So I am a refugee. I appreciate and I welcome the freedom that wearing a mask brings me, because I can still go out then, right? And so it's just a different perspective, and I love your perspective. So tell me, I want you to share with the audience what we talked about the first time we connected, after I put out that call on social media that I was looking for healers, because I wasn't sure what I was going to get as a response. I thought I'd get people that, like, I don't know what I thought, read tarot cards, that were practitioners like chiropractors. I had no idea, but your perspective I adored because I share it with you. So, how do you define healing through your work as an artist, and why?
Well, to me, I've always used the word healing in talking about what I do and in talking about why I do it. So to me, music is an energy, just like, as you mentioned, tarot or chiropractor work. Really what we're doing is we're moving energy, and we're exploring and we're playing with the energy of how we are now, and the energy of how we'd like to be, and the energy of maybe what's in the past. And like all of that is kind of dancing and playing together. So to me, music, and especially songs, not just the arrangement and the melody and the instruments that you choose, but also the words that we choose to sing over a melody, all of those elements contribute to the potential for release, for freedom, for healing. And the way that I define healing is really wholeness. So it's, when in our first conversation, I remember you and I talked about this, and if I really had to distill it down, I think that's what it would be. That to me, healing is coming back into balance with yourself. So healing doesn't look the same for everybody, and what we have to heal from on an individual level, group levels, societal levels, those things shift and change. So I don't think of healing as necessarily something that, you do the healing and it's done. Like, I'm done healing. There are always places to look and say, hey, like, what else is maybe raw, or maybe rough for me, or maybe not quite sewn up, to use a literal metaphor. And so I look at music and what music is capable of as contributing to that through vibration and through the power of a voice and instruments and harmony and our collective energies as musicians going into making something, that piece of music can impact people on a not just an emotional level, but maybe even a cellular and vibrational level, and contribute to healing.
I love it. I call that the ripple effect,
Mm-hmm.
and, I was taught a long time ago, but I'm really starting to own it now. And I can tell you own it, which is why I love working with artists and musicians. I don't know whose life I'm going to touch. And sometimes, I do group programs and, oh, well, maybe there should be more people in the program. And then I stop and think, the right people are here, the right people who are going to be moved, who really want to benefit and take that benefit and share it with others. And that's the beautiful part of this, that ripple effect. If we stop and really look at what we do as an expression of who we are that way, then it's so exciting. And it's so, the unknown is exciting, right? From that perspective, that I don't know who I'm going to touch, but boy, I can bet that maybe I'll never see the people they go and touch, but wow, I've done my part in this world. And that's healing for me, right? And I loved what you said. Healing is wholeness. I remember you and I talked about that. And what you said, I wrote it down. Healing is coming back into balance with myself. So what do you do to come back in balance with yourself when you find yourself out of balance as the healer, as the artist?
Sure. So I have a number of practices that I use in my own life, and some of them are musical. So to be honest, you wouldn't think that a professional songwriter or musician would need to remind herself to actually go and play music, but sometimes I do. And sometimes I get, I can get really wrapped up in the business side of the music industry, or in, the kind of chasm between like, here's where I am career-wise and here's where I want to be career-wise. Mm-hmm. And that can really take me out of balance. Or on not a career track, like sometimes if I am with a lot of people and, that's a lot of different energy, and then I come home, I feel kind of shaken up or rattled or like just unfocused. So to get myself back into balance, I might just go sit down on my piano and noodle and just kind of like see what comes out and what I play. And I will tell you, some days it's like actual music, and some days it's seriously just banging on the piano. Like it really can be that. And what I've learned over time and lots of paying attention and work is that, if that's what it is today, like honor that. Maybe today it really is like cat on a piano where I'm just, hitting different keys and seeing what that sound does for me or doesn't do for me. So that's, music for sure. And listening to the music of artists that I love. Sometimes music without words is better for me to kind of come back into balance. And there's a sector of music, and it's not even necessarily music. It's something called binaural beats. Have you heard of this?
I use it a lot to balance myself. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So the fun thing about binaural beats is it's based on the science of frequencies that your ear picks up that are kind of out of the audible range. So these frequencies are placed in the music, and it only works if you are listening in stereo. So you have to have headphones and earphones on to feel the effects of a binaural beat. But essentially, like, these frequencies are built into the music so that they're coming through both ears. And without getting into like all the science behind it, it essentially attunes your brainwaves, like your actual literal brainwaves, to the frequencies that they would be at various states. So like, I have a track that I use for anti-anxiety. If I'm like, let's say if I'm on an airplane and all of a sudden, the airplane, we're on the runway and it stops and there's an announcement that, we're going to be held on this runway for 30 minutes. And for me, I can have a tendency to really start to like freak out about, how does that impact plans? Oh my God, I can't sit on this airplane. What if it's longer? Like, a lot of sort of claustrophobic, stuff might come out of my brain.
I totally share that with you.
So I found, I tried this anti-anxiety track once when that happened. And I noticed that when I really just sat and paid attention to that music and focused on breathing and like just sit and listen and breathe, that within minutes, I really did feel my state calm. And I was able to move into a space of acceptance and like, okay, what do I want to do with this time? Hey, maybe this extra half hour is a gift. Like, what can I do with it? So, I use music, I use binaural beats. Yoga and meditation are other super favorite tools for coming back into balance. And I always encourage people to consider that you don't need a long time. So, sometimes people are like, oh, I really want to pick up a yoga practice or a meditation practice, but man, I don't even know. I just can't imagine where I'd fit it into my day. And my advice is always to consider that even if you start with a minute. Like even if you start with 2 minutes of all I'm going to do is I'm going to sit, I'm not going to have my phone, and I'm not going to be in front of a screen. And I'm actually going to just pay attention to my breathing, this profound mechanism, this thing that is keeping me alive, this thing that my body automatically does that I usually don't pay attention to because my body's automatically doing it.
Right.
And that just starting there can really be like the crack of light, you know, like cracking open the door to kind of begin to make your way through the door into a more regular practice. So, you know, that's based on experience, by the way, is like, I tend to be a very all or nothing person. Like it's like either I totally am not going to do it or like I'm going to do it big. But I really recommend if you're looking to adopt a practice that can give you more balance and healing over the long term, to really let yourself start small if it feels too overwhelming to start bigger.
And I think if I was to read what you're saying and summarize it, is, you know, as healers, whatever we do to provide that healing, we can't provide that for other people, that sense of wholeness that they will find through collaboration with us if we don't have self-care and self-healing for ourselves. And so I think it's interesting how professions differ from their outlook, or it's people based, but you know, you can see it trends in different professions that I'm really good at doing what I do. Well, how could you be, or how could you be better if you took time to take care of yourself, healed yourself, made yourself closer to wholeness, so that then you would be giving the absolute best to your audience, to your clients, to those who come to you and ask your advice, wisdom, pay you for it, buy your record. All of that is very important. And I love what you said about the fact that the industry, the music industry, has its ups and downs too. And it's so easy, like you said, Cassandra, to go down the path of getting mired in the business and the details and, you know, looking at competition and who's doing what and where, and forgetting that, going back to basics, that if I truly believe my work and my art is healing, then that's what I'm going to focus on. So I'm hoping the artists that are listening to this take that away. You know, where does your art really provide healing? Cassandra explained it so well scientifically, I think. But I just remember interviewing for a while Adam Lambert's audiences. They're called Glamberts. And one of them said it years and years ago. She said, I was at a concert and I was in the front row and he hit this note, and he's got such an awesome range, right? Mm-hmm. And she said he hit this note and I looked behind me and I saw this ripple effect going through the audience. It was an outdoor amphitheater. And she said it was like this peace that carried through the audience. And that truly is healing, right? Like to be able to use that frequency, as you said, and just the intention of coming across that way. And that's the beautiful part of working with artists. I always stand up on stage and I look out at the audience and I'm like, I'm just looking at your audience. I'm not looking at you. You do your thing. And I'm just going to look and see what the response is and how really, in my mind, the healing works. And so that starts with us being able to take care of ourselves first. And I really applaud you for doing that, because I know that makes you a great artist and a great healer.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's a journey for sure. And I would, you know, in no way want to convey to your audience that, you know, I've got it all figured out, or that every day is a, you know, a lovely day spent in the midst of, you know, the flowery fields of my mind, you know, like, no, I'm deep in it like everybody else is too. But, you know, I really respect the tools. And like any tool, I like this metaphor too, or I remind myself of it, that, you know, if you walk around with a tool belt and you've got your hammer and you've got your nails and you've got your saw and you've got your wrench and you have all these great tools and they're so good and you know what they're for, and then you don't take them off and use them, they actually just become kind of a heavy thing to carry around. So
Excellent. That's such a great analogy. I love it. Yeah, you're right. And I think we spend our whole lives trying to be perfect and amass tools, and then we don't use it. So no, I'm far from perfect either. I just put out a newsletter and I was talking about my refugee status. I'd always thought of myself as an immigrant. And back in 79, when we came to the US, that's what we were. But yes, just 2 days ago, my coach said, you were a refugee. Do you understand the distinction? And I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. So I'm kind of, sitting in the discomfort of being a refugee and having a new label for myself. So I get it.
wow.
I
Yeah.
totally get it. We're all a work in progress. So anything else you want to say about healing or how you define healing as an artist before we move on to part 2?
Well, I think that something you said really spurred something in my head as well, which was about the impact that you have on others when you're willing to put yourself out there. And that was something that really, it was a reminder to me, in that moment a few minutes ago when you said that, because I think that it's easy for all of us, but especially artists, to really, even if you're doing the work, even if you're being responsible for finding peace within yourself, and even if you're being responsible for really working on being a great communicator, a great songwriter, a great singer, whatever the impact is you want to have on your audience, it can be really easy. And I forget all the time, I forget that when you do share your vibe, right? You put your vibration out there, and you put it out there with that intention of goodness, whatever your intention is for it to do good and to move people in a positive way, that you have to let go of how that's going to land for people. And that's really hard. Yeah. At least it's hard for me. It's really hard for me to not want to control the result of, I'm vibrating and intending this way. And how do I know, I'm out here looking for signs in my audience. How do I know that this really moved you?
Right.
And it's a good reminder that, the healing process is a very personal one. And sometimes people who are profoundly moved by you are not going to tell you that. They're never going to come back around and, send you an email or a Facebook message or whatever and say, hey, I really want you to know that you made a difference for me. But they may do that years later, and that's happened a few times for me where somebody has messaged something years later. Or recently you asked about what I've been up to in quarantine, and I've been playing some online shows. So I've been broadcasting from my little studio office in Saratoga Springs, New York. And people are joining, and they join on Facebook, mostly on my Facebook page. Sometimes, occasionally I'll do something with an Instagram. But, some of the people, the audience members who have come on, I'm going, wow, I remember this fan from back when I was doing a lot of touring, and I was going to Connecticut to my home state and playing. And I would have figured I don't matter to them anymore. I would have figured that was long ago and far away, and they've totally forgotten about me. But then here they are hanging out and requesting songs for my second album. I'm on my 7th album, I think now. So
Wow.
It was really it was very humbling. And it was also kind of a bit of a wake-up call to be hey, do not think that what you're doing doesn't matter to people. It's really easy for us to do that. And I do it a lot, more than I care to admit, where I kind of downplay my value or my impact, even to myself. And so I just, I'm putting that out there. I think part of healing is remembering that wherever you are, sharing yourself vulnerably and authentically it can have a really positive, profound effect on people.
Absolutely. Thank you. Absolutely. So you said so many great things that could tie into part 2 here, where I asked you to either bring your biggest dream or your biggest block, and I'll coach you through it, brainstorm with you, whatever way you want to look at it. And this really is helpful for the audience to just learn from the coaching. It hopefully is very helpful for you. And I love it because that's what I do. So what do you think? Do you think it's some of the things that you just said, or do you have a dream or a big block that you're working through? Or maybe it's not a big block, but a block?
Sure. I mean, I would say for sure there are kind of specific individual things that show up for me. as an artist, but I'll put out a really broad one, and then we'll see maybe where that leads us, what road we go down. So I have a dream. I have a dream. And the dream is to be a hit songwriter and a hit artist. So what does that mean to me? What it looks like to me is, songs on the Billboard charts in the #1 slot, being able to go and perform for thousands of people in various places around the world, and look out in the crowd and see people singing my songs and waving their lighters, and, all those things that we'll do when we can be closer than 6 feet again. And what I have is I have a lot of things in my career that I said and I thought that I wanted when I started out, but I don't have that. And so right now where I'm at is dealing with a lot of back and forth internally about, do I really care about that? Because maybe if I did really care about it, I would have already gotten it. Hey, maybe I'm too old for that. Maybe that's just not going to happen anymore. Maybe that is maybe I'm just not really being clear because the universe really seems to show up and provide for me pretty well. So if it's not bringing me this, maybe I'm not being clear enough. So there's a lot of sort of mess going on internally around I define myself as a hit singer-songwriter, and what I feel like is I'm a working singer-songwriter, but I have not had a hit yet, and I really want that to transpire.
Yeah, that's a very fair rumination, we'll call it. And it's very accurate because I find that regardless of profession, we all go through that, but particularly artists do, because there's so many labels for artists, right? It's so unfair. Starving artists. We've got the up and coming artist. We have the world renowned artist. So the question really becomes twofold for you to consider, Cassandra, as you're looking at that. What in your past, and really this goes back to your childhood, we dig deep. And so here we're only for the sake of time, I'm just going to put it out to you. And really it's a vulnerable question. So you may, when we're coaching, we go really deep. It's just one-on-one. And so you may not want to share this with the whole audience, and that's very fair. But where in your childhood, because it's all correlative. It truly is. We clean out the past so that the brand shines, so that we can share the positive and the hard realities in a good way with the audience. So the bio you have is fantastic. I love that bio. I couldn't have done it myself any better. But tying in more for yourself, for your own edification, where in the past did you hear that there had to be a definition around that? Really from your childhood, and it would tie into what your parents told you, what messages you got from them up until around the age of 8, and how you chose to take that and implement it from that small child's perspective into who you are today, in order to define that success for yourself. Which leads to part 2 of that inquiry is, how do you really want to define success for yourself? And this is for everyone listening. With the pandemic, I hope we're all stepping back and going, what would success look like? And how am I choosing to define success differently that puts me in a happy place versus puts me smack in my ego where I'm always going to fail according to that standard? Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, that was a lot. So do you want to dig into,
if you're willing, let's dig into the first part, your childhood.
Yeah, cool. So what was your question? How does early childhood affect my perception of success as a songwriter? Or
well, the definition you gave, you said, what was the actual phrase you used? Being
a hit singer-songwriter.
A hit singer-songwriter. So where does your childhood experiences up to about age 8 or 10? And look, I'm not a therapist, but we've done enough of this work that I'm therapeutic for sure. What were the experiences like where you got conscious or subconscious messaging that to be a hit, anything required a certain framework that you described, like having this and this and this. So it's all correlative.
Okay. So what I can tell you that I remember is that I didn't decide I wanted to be a singer-songwriter and a hit singer-songwriter until I was off at college. So I went to college right before 9/11, and I decided there. But growing up, I was, let's see, I mean, my experiences with music, and I would say with pop music early on, were more related to going to see outdoor shows. So we saw a lot of jazz concerts, and my parents listened to a lot of 70s singer-songwriters, NPR, the radio, Broadway type shows. And if we're only going up to around age 8, I would say that I really didn't, there was no one in my family that was a professional musician or entertainer. So there really wasn't like any kind of a role model to say, what is this? So probably, very deeply and unconsciously, whatever messages I got about like, hey, like what equals a hit artist or a big artist came from like, who's on the radio? Who do I see on TV? Who's doing a PBS concert special? So those would be some of the things I remember. We also didn't have cable, and I remember probably later than 8, but probably a little more around like early teen years. But I have definitely recognized that, looking back, the whole kind of culture, like explosive pop culture and video culture of like, bands and artists that broke out into the mainstream and MTV, that was something that I really didn't have a lot of access to. And I think I really had a judgment about it too, because my parents had a judgment about it. So, there was like a not interested, or like a kind of like, we're not going to let you watch that because in some way it's bad. And so even though eventually I went into this field and write songs and have made lots of music videos and continue to do those things, maybe I'm just trying to think of like what in that time period could have kind of set the bar for like, if I don't succeed, like if I don't sell millions of records and play for millions of fans, then like it doesn't count.
Exactly. So what you said was really powerful because of this construct of reality that I bring up. So perception equals reality in the branding world, and really just in life. What we perceive, we create, and we turn into our reality. And perception is based on the what we heard, the stories. So my example is, I always loved dogs, but I hated cats. And I couldn't figure out, like, if I love animals, I love animals, but I didn't like cats. And one day I was driving my mom, and she said to me, oh, and those damn cats, I hate cats. And I just looked at her, and I had this moment like, oh my gosh, that wasn't my reality. That was my mom's reality that formed my perception of whether I like cats or not. So once I got that, and this is like 5 years ago, so I'm 48. This was way well past my 8-10-year-old formative years. So I was like, wow, perception really does form reality. So for you, your parents saying certain things and defining things a certain way, you took that and you put it together when you decided in college that you were going to be a successful artist. It sounds like, okay, so sit with this and mull it over, led you to have a certain perception of success as an artist, which goes to the second part of my question. How do you really define success as a healer? If healing is really bringing people back into wholeness and bringing people back into balance with themselves and you into balance with yourself, focus, in my opinion, on just providing that healing, because it's such a beautiful thing. You're just coming from love. That, this, it takes all the pressure off of you. The competition, competitiveness drives stress. And according to my formal research, stress goes up, self-confidence drops. That is literally physiological, according to my formal research. And I'm happy to share that with you, Cassandra, my summary, and with the audience. But when your self-confidence is low because your stress is high, because you're focused on competing with yourself for that definition of success that's based on past realities that your parents set up, and they, parents do the best they can. This is not in any way a judgment on any parents, but people judge, right? So stress is high, self-confidence is low, and we're never going to get to that success measure that we're seeing for ourselves with filling hundreds and thousands of people in stadiums and having, a huge fan base and making lots of money. So I have found that we all have that issue. I have that issue. So one day I just said, you know what? And it's not easy, but I said, I'm just going to take my focus off of all of that, because everyone has a dream and a vision, right? And as a public speaker and doing what I do, I have that same vision. But I said, I'm just going to focus on one person at a time and just coming at them from love and wanting them to be the best artist, lawyer, whatever, whoever it is I'm working with, because I choose to provide that healing so they can go out there and heal. And it took a lot of pressure off. So try that on. Now, I can't say it's a perfect formula. It is a perfect formula. Let me restate that. I don't always do it perfectly, right? Because I jump back into my ego, which is normal. And I forget. So I put little sticky notes up everywhere. The best way to combat that subconscious slipping into ego is what I call it, right? Where your higher self isn't serving you well, is to remind yourself. So I have sticky notes everywhere reminding myself of that. And some days I look at them, other days I don't. And some days I get really mad at myself for not looking at that. But at least I'm putting forth the effort. And those fleeting moments where I'm in that state where I'm like, I'm just going to focus on Cassandra and what benefit this could bring her so she could take her art and her beautiful voice and her beautiful songwriting skills and make a difference for one person. Even in those fleeting moments, it makes a difference. And I think that's the lesson and the healing and how we can overcome that. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, I definitely think that a lot of those things have come up before. I think it's yeah, there's more to it, but for sure, I think that focusing on healing and coming from love is usually a good place to start when you feel like overwhelmed by the, goals and artificial kind of ego goals that we have.
And really redefining success and then how you choose to look at competition. I have never looked at other people who do what I do in my space. I'm not sure if there is anyone in my space because I've never looked, but I've always chosen to think that my natural talents and my skills are special, and then I'm just going to focus on me. It's not always easy because I have a jealous side too, and the green-eyed monster shows up and it gets frustrating. However, it's just a very simple tool for combating that stress that gets triggered in all of us. That sometimes if we can't stop and meditate and can't stop and do yoga and do our own healing therapies, then it just runs away with us. And that's not even taking into account the external stuff. Before we started this podcast, you and I were talking about detoxing and eating healthy and hormones and all that stuff. It's at play. So removing those external stressors to the best that we can, including competition and the notion of competition, allows us to really open up a clean slate where you get to redefine what your success looks like. So I say to you, sit down and write out and reframe, what is a successful Cassandra as an artist? And really you'll find you'll probably delve deep into who you are as a person. Because mine got really simple when I did that. All it was having peace in my life and having joy, whatever that meant. And I was like, that's it. That's success. And it was really humbling, but it was also at first felt a little hollow. And then I'm like, hey, that's it. And then as the more I sat with it, the more I realized, oh my gosh, peace and joy are really hard. And am I like a tree hugger? Am I turning into one of those weird people that, like from the 70s, the love children, or was that the 60s? I don't even know, right? Because I was born in 72. But am I like one of those weirdos that's going to be wearing Birkenstocks and eating granola and all the stereotypes? And I thought, oh, who cares? Now you're going down that road again, right? So bring it back to basics of what success looks like. And I think that's really attractive for yourself. And your audience will just feel it because you're clear on it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Awesome. So sometimes in one-on-one work with clients, we sit in that space of quiet while people really feel it and take it in. In the interest of time for the podcast, we can't obviously do that. And I like to be looking at people. You and I can't see each other right now on the podcast recording, but if it was just you and me, I'd like for you to just sit in that space of really what that success looks like and having you redefine it. And just the two of us would sit there very quietly in that space while you really felt around and dug around in it and felt it. And then once your physiology really literally responded to that, we could then take that and develop it into this brand and this premise, and you define it for yourself and I just collaborate. But that's the starting point. So when we get off this podcast, I suggest you sit with it and feel into it and see what comes up and what blocks come up. And, as I tell all my listeners, come to all of this with a beginner's mind. I may have heard this, but I'm just going to start from the beginning like I've never heard it before. And I was told that so many years ago. And every time I go to a class, I'm like, I already know this. Why am I here? I'm like, you know what? I'm going to come with a beginner's mind and learn anew. So I hope that was helpful. That provided you a negative wisdom.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, definitely the reminder to, show up and be willing to hear things anew is a great reminder.
Awesome. So for our listeners, I hope that was helpful as well. Happy to have you all listening to the What and Who is a Healer podcast. I'm learning. I hope you're learning from fabulous guests like Cassandra. And I hope you take this wisdom, spread it. If you're an artist, keep doing what you're doing because your work is so important. Like Cassandra said, working as an artist, as a musician, truly heals vibrationally, pragmatically, whatever word you want to call it, but your work matters. You matter. You're important. And that's really why your brand is so important, because we've got to get your message out far and wide so people can find you and become your biggest fan and then spread the word, because then look how many people you're healing from that place. So please share this podcast with whoever you think would benefit. And until next time, Katy G out. Anything you want to say, Cassandra, before we end?
Well, just thank you for having me on, and thanks for everybody listening. I hope that everybody is in a good place on their own healing journey. And of course, feel free to reach out anytime. You can find me on socials at Cassandra Kubinski, and also, of course, on your favorite music listening platforms at Cassandra Kubinski.
Yes, and for sure, you really should go to her website and her platforms, because her voice is that of an angel, truly a healer, and her music just gets better and better. So it's Cassandra Kubinski, KUBINSKI.com, and we'll put that on the link as well. All right, everyone. Until next time, Katy G out.